my heroes is Abraham Lincoln. And a while back, there was a wonderful book written by Doris Kearns Goodwin called Team of Rivals, in which talked about how Lincoln basically pulled in all the people who had been running against him into his cabinet, because whatever personal feelings there were, the issue was, how can we get this country through this time of crisis? And I think that has to be the approach that one takes, whether it's vice president or cabinet.
The president-elect mentions her, and we have her on the program, the historian and author of Team of Rivals, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Doris, you can't get a better build-up than that, can you?
No, it's been really terrific.
It's good to have you, and this is such an interesting topic. It is something, a book besides the Bible, that President-elect Obama has said that he would consult as a kind of guide for him in his leadership and in his presidency. And now we are seeing the potential of Senator Clinton being in his cabinet. A very important meeting with his most recent vanquished political foe, Senator McCain. It adds up to something that could be a hallmark of his leadership style. What does it say to you?
Well, what it says, number one, is that he has a sense of history, which is so great for a president to look back into the past and learn from previous presidents. It also says that he has a great deal of internal self-confidence, to be willing to surround himself with people who are more experienced than he, that he's willing to brook dissent within his cabinet, because when you bring these fiery people inside, there's going to be lots of arguments. That was what was true for Lincoln. So I think it's a window onto his character. It may make for some difficult times ahead, but as he himself said, and as Lincoln said, the country's in peril. You need to reach out to the strongest and most able people in the country, and I bet you he's going to have the confidence to do that, without a question.
What can you tell us about conversations you've had with then Senator Obama about this very topic?
Well, the interesting thing is he called me on the phone. I just answered my cell one day, very early in the primary process. He said, "Hello, this is Barack Obama." And he told me he had read the book and that he really had absorbed not only the idea of the team of rivals, but the temperamental qualities that Lincoln had in his leadership were ones that he was going to try to emulate. And I think it's just a terrific thing when you can have a gold standard person like Lincoln as your mentor. So all along it seemed to me that this is not surprising, because I think he understands he's got this capacity, I think, to look at people and see things from their point of view as well as his own. So if you have people in your cabinet who argue with you, even though at a certain point you have to make a decision, it may go against what they wanted, you've absorbed their point of view. So when you explain it to your countrymen, then it means that you are really giving them validation for their point of view. And I think that's his modus operandi. We hear that within his campaign, that's what he does. He loves to have big discussions, and then he restates other people's point of view even more eloquently than they themselves stated it. And it means you've got more options. You're not simply an echo chamber, and it could mean a big deal for your presidential leadership. It was huge for Lincoln. It was so unusual to have that kind of a cabinet. And interestingly, he brings Seward in. The parallel with Hillary is uncanny. Secretary of State Seward becomes. He was the senator from New York. He was his chief rival. It meant that there were rocky beginnings to their relationship. Seward was rather arrogant at the beginning, but he gave Seward access. He understood that Seward had hurt feelings. He went over to Seward's mansion at Lafayette Park, and they would talk for hours. That'll be important for Hillary, I think, to have special access to him. But in the end, Seward became his closest friend, and it changed the course of history.
And it does inspire potentially a level of confidence in the American people to say, look, this is somebody who took him on in a big way, in a personal way, in a substantive way as well, and yet he was able to provide her then with not just any old job, but to be the face of foreign policy in an administration where foreign policy will play a huge role.
To surround himself with a superstar like Hillary and have her able to try and reconfigure American feelings abroad and how people feel about us, it really is a large statement. It's giving her a big space. And I have a feeling whatever temperamental qualities they need to work together can be worked out in terms of it will give her an even larger stage than she would have had in the Senate. I know she's comfortable in the Senate, but this could be history-making for her as well. So what's good for her is good for him, and most importantly, I think good for the country.
What about a contrarian question, though? We showed pictures just a moment ago of the president-elect with the current president, George W. Bush. And one of the things we know from more recent historical accounts of the Bush administration in the run-up to the Iraq War is that here was a president who had less experience than some of these very big figures in foreign policy and Washington experience who were around that table. I'm talking about the Vice President and Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, even the National Security Advisor Rice, Secretary of State Powell, and yet there was disagreement at a level that created paralysis in the government and the policy in the Iraq War. And as president, whatever his temperament, he didn't have the wherewithal, the experience, the clout, whatever the reason, he didn't have an ability to break through some of the paralysis that resulted in policy. What makes Barack Obama different, and what can he draw upon from Lincoln in that regard?
Well, I don't think it's just a question of experience. What Lincoln understood is that the search for consensus could be paralyzing, that at a certain point you had to make a decision and then bring the people abroad. He allowed everybody to argue for months about what to do about slavery. Nothing could be more controversial than that. There were people who wanted to end it instantly, others who wanted to not touch it at all, radical, conservative, moderates. Finally, he makes his decision to emancipate the slaves. He comes to the cabinet. I've made up my mind now. I don't want to hear your views anymore on this, but I'll listen to your suggestions on its implementation and its timing. So it's that kind of leadership that you have to exert. Even if these other people have more experience, you're the one with the judgment to make the final decision. And then you bring them aboard, hopefully.
All right, we'll leave it there. A lot yet to witness and talk about. Doris Kearns Goodwin, always a pleasure.
Oh, you too, David.